Up until a short time ago, I considered my life to be quite content. I wasn't exceedingly wealthy, but neither did I need to seek financial assistance. In addition, I was blessed with a wonderful partner, Emma, along with 2 children, Eric and Melanie. They had grown up and embarked on their university education, with my daughter even preparing to marry her university acquaintance Zach in the near future. All seemed to be moving along well. Yet, a couple of months back, my spouse, who had unexpectedly been reassigned to night shifts, started to seem more withdrawn from me. She explained that the nocturnal shifts were a struggle for her, as she wasn't as young as before and experienced increased exhaustion. At first, I believed her and offered my support in whatever way possible, at times even preparing meals so she could rest a bit more upon her morning return. Working as an electrician, I was occasionally able to leave work somewhat early if I completed my tasks ahead of time. One afternoon, after a chat with my wife, I set off to the grocery store to buy some groceries. There, I encountered a friend who had recently returned from an extended business trip. He proposed we catch up over a drink at a local pub to celebrate his successful project. Before I could join him, I needed to store the groceries at home and inform Emma that I would not be home that night. She said she had plans to leave soon as well, so it posed no problem for her. With the next day off, I saw it as an opportunity to enjoy a well-deserved break. We went to the pub, which was near my place, and a venue I often visited with colleagues or friends, particularly because of the high-quality beer they offered. Mike recounted his adventures in the north and shared that he would refuse another assignment there, as he much preferred warmer locales. Throughout his trip, he was perpetually chilled despite wearing heavy clothing, finding comfort only through the nightly warmth of brandy. As he shared his tales, a patron of the pub, who had overindulged in alcohol, started causing a disturbance. 2 robust patrons tried to soothe him, but he remained unruly. A commotion ensued, and they accidentally propelled him towards us, bumping him into another patron and sparking a widespread brawl in the pub, involving roughly a third of those present. Mike and I joined in, seeing it as an opportunity for some physical engagement. However, the fun ended abruptly when Mike's arm was hit by a chair, resulting in a snap and intense agony. It was apparent his arm had broken. I immediately stopped engaging and helped my friend out to call an ambulance and head to the hospital. We ended up at the nearest hospital, where my wife worked, and that's where we were taken. Mike was quickly moved to the emergency room, and I decided to stay until I could visit him. While wandering the corridors, Emma noticed me and approached. "Jack, why are you here?" she asked. I explained about my friend's mishap, mentioning Mike's broken arm and my wait to visit him. "Oh no. What occurred?" "I assumed you were simply going out for a drink," she commented. I mentioned it was a complicated story, but assured her Mike was tough. After a short conversation, she was called away by another medical staff member and returned to her duties. An hour later, I saw Mike, who was now in a cast and cheerful. "You look like a mummy in that cast. Did they exaggerate?" I teased. He laughed it off, stating it was all good and that he now had a valid reason to take a break from work, especially after his exhausting recent trip. I spotted my wife assisting a doctor. "She's truly proficient." "Indeed, quite lucky," I said, pondering over her recent coolness towards me. However, it might have been my own interpretation. Having done night shifts myself, I was familiar with their difficulty. That evening, upon my return, Emma shared that she might be returning to her usual schedule soon. I certainly breathed a sigh of comfort knowing that, after our more than 20 years together in matrimony, her presence in our bed had become something I had grown accustomed to. During her absence, I sensed a mild feeling of solitude. Days went by, and Emma kept up with her night shifts. I made it a point to check on my friend after my work hours, learning from his physician that he'd soon be discharged, needing only to return for periodic checkups. Eager for that day, I planned to help my friend with his return journey home. Upon reaching his place, he made his way to his modest liquor collection, picked out a whiskey bottle, and poured a drink for me. "Mike, what are you doing? You're on medications. Isn't this a risk for hospital readmission?" The thought of him mixing alcohol with his prescriptions alarmed me. "It's mostly for you, Jack. Take a seat, I just want to talk, or more accurately, reveal something to you, and it's going to be unsettling what's going on, buddy. You're worrying me? You seemed fine just now. A sense of discomfort washed over me, though at the time his hints were elusive. However, from his tone it was evident he was about to disclose. Something serious. True, I was in good spirits, but I couldn't bring myself to tell you earlier. I know you're spontaneous, and with your wife around, I feared your reaction might have catastrophic results. What are you suggesting? What does my wife have to do with this? His words sent a shiver through me. Mike handed me a drink, positioned himself across me, took a sip, and then let out a lengthy exhale. The thing is, you know I smoke, which is strictly against hospital policy. One night, feeling unsettled for some reason, I decided to sneak out for a smoke. I had to quietly get past the nurse's station to avoid being noticed, and as I walked past the nursing area and turned a corner, I overheard, possibly from one of the rooms, maybe the examination room, I'm not certain, I overheard sounds of intimacy. They were trying to be discreet, but I could still hear it now and then, so I decided to peek to see how the hospital staff unwind. It's a bit of excitement, right? We're all human after all. You've had your moments of sneaking off with someone attractive too. I was slightly surprised that Mike attached such importance to this incident. Jack, it was your wife with one of the doctors. What his claims about my wife were unbelievable and upsetting. You're wrong. You must have been seeing things. Emma would never do such a thing. Are you saying, I don't know my own wife, I wished I was wrong, but it was indeed her, and I saw them together again the next night? I'm really sorry, but I couldn't keep this from you, he said regretfully. I finished my drink in one go, stood up, and walked over to the window. The disclosure left me in shock. I began to recall recent events in our home life and slowly started to understand why there had been such a drastic change in Emma's behavior, yet I struggled to believe Mike's account. So you saw them together. 2 nights in a row, but said nothing. I turned to him. Why didn't you tell me right away? Yes, I should have come clean immediately, but I also thought it might be a hallucination from the medication, and somehow I felt you needed evidence at this. He reached into his pocket, took out his smartphone, played a recent video, and handed it to me. My hands trembled a bit as I took the phone, and I took a deep breath. Until that moment, I hoped Mike was mistaken, or that this was some sort of cruel prank on his part. Reluctantly, I pressed the play button, and the video started. In certain frames, my wife's face was clearly visible, her eyes closed, and though she wasn't directly facing the camera, her identity was unmistakable. In that moment, my world imploded, and it felt as if the ground disappeared beneath me. It's hard to articulate the mix of emotions I experienced. Rage and anger consumed me instantly, but at the same time, I felt utterly devastated by the betrayal and disappointment. I wanted to vanish, yet the desire to confront them both, had they been present, without saying a word, was overwhelming. To Mike, I gripped the phone tightly, made my way to the table, grabbed the entire bottle, and then silently headed for the door. Jack, hey Jack, where are you off to? Mike shouted from behind. Give me the phone, I need to make a call. But as if I hadn't heard him, I continued on without a word, not pausing. Although at that moment the urge to strike him for such distressing news was strong, I realized he wasn't to blame. I chose to leave in silence to avoid a rush of anger that could lead to injuring his other arm. I wandered to the park. It was almost night, and there were hardly any people around. Still, I found a secluded place for myself and settled there with the bottle of whiskey, which now brought me solace, having consumed half of it during the short walk. True, I yearned to storm into that hospital, aggressively confront the doctor, and demand answers from my spouse, but at that time, the identity of the person responsible remained a mystery, their face hidden, and Mike was unable to uncover it. I also recognized the potential personal fallout such a confrontation might cause, forcing me to think carefully about my next steps. I reviewed the video again, watching it through to the end in hopes of picking up any clue that might reveal the identity of my spouse's associate. Watching those scenes replay was torturous, and the thought of throwing my phone against a hard surface crossed my mind. yet I persisted until the end, ultimately finding nothing helpful. Once the bottle was empty and I was considerably intoxicated, I made up my mind to head home. No particular thoughts occupied my mind, yet the craving for another drink persisted, with more alcohol waiting at home. However, as I started to walk back, 2 police officers appeared as if out of thin air. Whether they noticed my state or had been tipped off, they grabbed my arms and started escorting me towards their car. I tried to explain, my speech slurred, that I was dealing with a family crisis and was actually fine, but my attempts seemed to be ignored. I spent the night in a cell, released the next morning once the effects of the alcohol had worn off and after having a talk with them, since I hadn't caused any commotion. Upon release, I called in sick to work, then went back to Mike for advice. Jack, are you out of your mind? Where have you been? I couldn't even reach you because I don't know your number, and you had my phone. Mike peppered me with questions as soon as he opened the door. Here, take it, I said, handing him the phone and stepping inside. When Mike offered me coffee, which I took, I asked for his assistance. What, back to the hospital? What am I supposed to tell them? Mike looked puzzled when he heard he had to go back to the hospital. Make something up, say your arm hurts, or would you rather... I looked at his other arm. Oh, wait, what are you suggesting? Have you completely lost it? In this rephrased version, I strive to maintain the structure and length of the original text, altering phrases and sentences to present the same information differently without omitting any details. Perhaps he was attempting to convince me to rethink my decisions, yet what understanding did he possess? He wasn't the one betrayed by his partner. Subsequently, he made his way to the hospital and called me from that location, sharing that he had managed to persuade the hospital staff that his arm was suffering immensely, leading them to fabricate an excuse for him to stay the night. In the meantime, I relied on coffee to keep alert for any communications from him. It wasn't until the following morning that Mike reached out, informing me he had gone out for multiple smoke breaks, remaining observant, yet during these times he encountered nor overheard anyone. Additionally, on his last outing, a nurse admonished him in a manner that was uniquely hers. This update left me disheartened, but my urgency to uncover the identity of the individual in the video with my wife made the thought of waiting another night unbearable. Consequently, I resolved to face my wife, ready to undertake whatever necessary to elicit her admission. Expressing my appreciation to my ally for his support, I proceeded towards home. Emma had not yet returned. Her arrival was anticipated in several hours. After spending the night awake, exhaustion began to overtake me, prompting me to lie down on the couch for a short rest. Troublesome dreams tormented me, causing me distress even in sleep. Subsequently, I was awakened by Emma's voice trying to stir me. Awakening, still under the influence of the disturbing dreams, it took a moment for me to remember the cause of my distress. However, it wasn't long before the harsh truth hit me once again, and the acrimony of the situation overwhelmed both my soul and heart. My attitude shifted instantly upon this realization, and Emma became aware she might have even guessed the topic of our imminent conversation, yet she exhibited no evidence of this, only growing cautious. Grasping her hand, I compelled her onto the couch and hovered over her, restraining her. "Jack, what is going on?" she inquired, fear evident in her expression. "Was it a nightmare? What's the matter with you? Release me, it hurts." "You're in pain. What about my pain? I've dedicated countless years to you, cherished you, believed in you. And you, who is he? I insist on knowing his identity," I pressed on, fueled by my fury. As anticipated, she started to deny everything, but I was convinced of my evidence. It was only when Emma began to weep that I recognized my excessive forcefulness, though causing her severe harm was never my goal. I merely sought her acknowledgement, hence I let her go. Emma sat upright on the couch, coughing, then launched into a tirade of accusations against me, arguing that I was delusional and in need of psychiatric intervention. At that point, I retrieved my phone and displayed the video that I had earlier forwarded from Mike's device. Now, Emma was mute, just fixating on the display. When she first appeared on the video, I lifted my hand and struck her with force. "Nobody, is that so? And yet you dare to contest?" I lifted my hand once more, but Emma folded into herself, embracing her legs, and let out a mournful weep, prompting me to halt, lowering my hand. "Who is he?" I demanded. "Speak, or I'm unsure of my actions." Upon realizing she had no alternative but to confess, Emma began to cry. Holding back her sobs, she divulged her secret liaison with the doctor who supervised their section. Occasionally, he would work late, and they would steal brief instances together. "I promise it's insignificant. Please pardon me," she wept. "Trust me, I can't even comprehend what occurred. I was so depleted and fatigued." "Exhausted from what? If you were fatigued, you ought to have taken a break. How can I trust you now I was unable to calm?" "Jack, truthfully, it was a singular occurrence. I was deeply troubled," she implored. This woman was misleading me yet again. "Deceiver, you're now utterly repugnant to me," I uttered, turning away and moving towards the kitchen. Upon my arrival, Emma headed towards the bedroom. "Where are you off to?" I questioned, my tone filled with irritation. "I must get some rest. There's work awaiting me tonight," she replied, seemingly unfazed by the situation. "What work? You've already left that job," I remarked as I pursued her. "Please dial them this instant with me here and inform them you're not showing up any longer." Emma attempted to protest, yet the firmness in my voice and gaze convinced her, leading her to make the phone call. Subsequently, I instructed her not to exit the premises. I recognized that our recent conversation hadn't adequately expressed my disapproval, yet I was intent on not inflicting any physical harm on her. My thoughts turned towards devising a more significant penalty for her actions. However, prior to that, I was determined to address Dr. Elliot Haven. I secured her within the bedroom before departing. I then adorned my work attire, made several stops, and proceeded towards the hospital, convinced that if Dr. Haven wasn't present during the night, he would definitely be there in the daytime. My plan wasn't to directly barge into his office. Rather, I was formulating a scheme for vengeance en route, aiming to ensure he permanently remembered the repercussions of involving himself with subordinates or another's partner. Upon arriving at the hospital, I claimed my visit was to examine the electrical setup in the trauma section. I entered effortlessly, casually, inquiring about Dr. Haven's office location from both patients and nurses. Discovering he was out on rounds and his office locked didn't deter me. Utilizing a lock-picking set, I stealthily entered his office unnoticed. Inside, I located a room with a sink, used a marker to make several marks on the mirror, and manipulated the sink by attaching wires. The preparation was swift. Following this, I interfered with his pen, likely utilized for documentation, and exited his office without drawing attention. I relocated to a neighboring vacant room, feigning an inspection of the electrical sockets. To extend my stay, I deliberately tampered with one, ensuring my actions seemed legitimate. Previously, I had visited a hospital acquaintance, asking him to distract the doctor with unnerving stories about spirits haunting the hospital, particularly those of deceased individuals. Additionally, my friend informed me of a recently deceased devout elderly lady. In the morgue, where the belongings of the deceased were stored, I acquired her ancient scarf and placed it in Dr. Haven's office. After some time, I overheard Dr. Haven and Mike approaching, with Mike continuing his spectral tales until they reached the office door. Dr. Haven, while keeping his composure, didn't outright dismiss him but recommended Mike adhere to his routines and rest upon arriving at the office door. I ceased my pretense of inspection and eavesdropped, pressing my ear against the wall. Initial sounds of disturbance were followed by swearing, likely due to the doctor accidentally staining himself with ink. Shortly after, loud footsteps and a buzzing resembling a transformer fault were heard, then a sharp cry. I knew exactly where the cable I had tampered with awaited activation. After a brief pause around 19 seconds, while the doctor remained shaken, I quickly removed it from behind the wall. A momentary silence was followed by renewed noise, then swearing, and finally silence once more. It appeared the message was clear, reflected on the mirror for the Dr. Cheetah: "Your retribution is imminent." I had eagerly awaited this moment, yet soon after the sound of footsteps returned and the doctor exited his office. Despite appearing as though he had experienced an electric shock, he stood firm. I cautiously observed him as he looked disheveled, calling for help. He didn't try to immediately regain his composure. Rather, he called over another doctor, admitting he felt harassed and had evidenced the written message on the mirror. Once more, I leaned close to the wall, straining to hear the muffled exchange. Doctor. Havens Peer, having seen nothing in the mirror, deemed him unhinged, recommending a hiatus. The cause of this event was clear to me. The ink I had applied to the mirror was designed to appear only at a specific time before disappearing as if it had never been there. The peer left the room, and Dr. Haven seemingly chose to take a day's leave. I caught the sound of his steps moving towards a cupboard and the sound of the door swinging open, followed by a startled exclamation from him, after which he quickly vacated the room, as if scolded. I couldn't tell if he harbored beliefs in ghosts or similar phenomena, yet evidently my ruse had its impact on him. The critical moment occurred when he opened the cupboard, and he was shrouded in a dark mist emanating from an aged woman's shawl. I remained hidden, pausing to relish the result. My sole lament was my indirect observation, yet even via the auditory signals, I sensed the outcome aligned with my anticipations. Departing the hospital, I offered thanks to my collaborator and proceeded home. There awaited another character, Kaisner, implicated in the deception, seeking my attention. Upon my return, I was met with an eerie quietude momentarily. I pondered if Emma had escaped. However, I decided to check the bedroom, which was, as previously, locked from the outside. Unlocking it, I found my wife on the bed, soundly asleep, to which I mockingly muttered about her fatigue. I then re-secured the door and commenced the subsequent stage of my distinct retribution. I contacted a friend adept in crafting realistic props for film sets, requesting a particular item from him, and commenced modifications to the kitchen and living area. Additionally, I disconnected the Wi-Fi and had earlier taken Emma's phone to obstruct her from informing her paramour about a possible encounter with me. I also reached out to my employer again, claiming a serious ailment, and sought more time off. With all arrangements in place, I returned to the bedroom, rousing my wife not gently but by aggressively shaking the bed, urging her to awaken. "What are you doing? Have you lost your wits? Why wreck the furniture like this? Couldn't you have woken me normally?" It seemed to me she harbored no guilt for her deeds, instead acting as if I was the transgressor. Discontent with her demeanor, I firmly admonished her. "Do you think I'm out of my mind? Perhaps I am, but you're to blame. You've destroyed everything between us. What do you expect me to do now? Do you think I can just ignore everything? No, from this point forward. Yet things will proceed according to my plan. You will stay here and perform all the responsibilities of a wife. Do you comprehend?" I addressed her, infusing a sense of dread. Emma slowly rose, looked at me with hostility but stayed quiet, and made her way to the kitchen. Upon reaching the ground floor, she couldn't help but dash towards the exit, aiming to escape. Yet, as soon as she touched the doorknob, she felt a minor electric zap on her fingertips. Crying out, not so. Much from agony but from terror, she hurried to the fire escape, only to encounter the same sensation there. "What have you done?" she screamed at me. Approaching her, I laid my hand on her shoulder and brought my index finger to my lips. "Shesh, don't be alarmed. You shouldn't waste your strength on futile efforts. You're worn out. Just prepare dinner and continue to rest," I insisted, with a forced grin. Then I withdrew to the living room, leaving her to ponder and wait. While she busied herself in the kitchen, I tuned into the sounds of kitchen appliances malfunctioning around her. The lid of the blender blew off, scattering its contents across the kitchen, and the oven's timer malfunctioned, resulting in burnt meat. Emma continued to curse and intermittently summoned me to investigate the malfunctions. "And what about me? Why didn't you seek help from your doctor?" "I'm definitely not as good as him," I sarcastically remarked, shifting my attention back to the television. Emma even went as far as demanding I return her phone so she could summon a qualified technician to rectify the situation, yet I held firm. Consequently, she found herself also deprived of the landline, as I had severed its connection. The days that followed were sheer agony for Emma. I confined her within the home, claiming it was to shield her from external dangers, thereby eliminating any possibility for her to reach out to others. Later, a parcel arrived from a companion, and as Emma was preparing for bed, I was setting up yet another jolt for her. The ensuing day, upon requesting she prepare an omelette to my preference, I resumed my usual spot in the living room, engaging with the television. Shortly after, a harrowing scream echoed from the kitchen, succeeded by the sound of something crashing in Emma's sobs. Leisurely, I made my way to the kitchen, finding Emma collapsed near the wall, horror etched across her face. She was speechless, merely gesturing towards the refrigerator. Upon inspection, I discovered Elliot's head within a jar, submerged in a specific solution. This artificial head had been procured through a friend. Silently closing the refrigerator, I sat beside my spouse. Frankly, the rage and retribution had taken its toll on me too. I figured she had endured enough. Now, speaking softly, I explained Emma that this demonstrates the consequences of betrayal. Don't regard me as a fiend. The doctor remains unharmed, likely still employed at the hospital. The true fiend in our household is you, having betrayed our love and family. What more did you seek? Emma, albeit gradually regaining her composure, remained stunned by her experience. She exhaled deeply before facing me. Jack, I seek your forgiveness. I truly regret my actions, her tone now embodying authentic remorse. It was apparent she realized her folly. While I couldn't fully pardon her, I endeavored to continue our cohabitation. Our history was extensive, and with our daughter Melanie's nuptials on the horizon, I was loath to cast a shadow over the event. Emma, for her part, appeared somewhat transformed. She kept silent about our ordeal, perhaps due to shame, dedicating herself more fervently to our family thereafter. My relationship with my now father-in-law, Phil, was complicated by a month-long liaison that concluded a mere 2 days before my marriage. Since that episode, I've committed myself as a faithful and loving spouse, holding my husband in the highest esteem. On the affair's final day, Phil and I came to terms with the gravity of our actions, seeking divine forgiveness through prayer and pledging to bury this grave lapse in judgment. Since making amends, life has seemed to improve, and I've managed to mentally discard this dark chapter as if it never transpired. My interactions with Phil now mirror those of a conventional father-in-law and daughter-in-law dynamic, albeit with a degree of reservation. Post-incident, Phil and I have avoided being alone together, with conversations occurring solely in my husband's presence. Living a considerable distance from my in-laws, roughly a 4.5-hour drive, our visits are infrequent, spanning 3 to 5 occasions annually. Here's the current predicament over the Christmas holidays. My grown daughter and her husband attended a gathering with her sister-in-law, Saul, and his partner. My brother-in-law had partaken in an ancestry DNA test recently, aimed at uncovering familial roots. The results, shared with my daughter and her spouse, piqued their interest, sparking a desire to delve into our lineage's early East Coast beginnings before our westward migration. Her excitement was so palpable that my husband was inspired to obtain kits for the entirety of our family. We have a considerably large household, hosting over 5 children under our roof. The complication arises in that I am uncertain whether it's my husband or my father-in-law, Phil, who is the real father of my daughter. Yet it's undisputed that my husband has played the role of a devoted father to her. Consequently, I'm deliberating on whether to hold off until the DNA results are in. If the results confirm that my husband is the biological parent, I plan to keep silent, but if not, I'm contemplating whether it's necessary to initiate a difficult conversation and unveil the truth. The topic of genetic testing was broached just 2 days prior, and since then I've struggled with sleep and appetite. The overwhelming memories of my past indiscretion, which I had deeply buried for over 2 decades, have resurfaced, tormenting me. I've felt a constant urge to confess everything to my husband, fully aware that such an admission could lead to him leaving and our marriage being annulled, even by the church's standards. My honesty about my previous relationships was not whole. Eventually, he discovered the reality and graciously forgave me. Yet, I'm convinced his tolerance wouldn't extend to this situation. I believe that honesty is what God demands of me, and by withholding this secret I perpetuate my sin. Nevertheless, I'm torn, fearing the destruction of my husband's life and the end of our marriage. What's your advice? Yours truly, overwhelmed by despair and remorse. To elaborate further without divulging too much to safeguard my family's privacy, my husband is a few years my senior, and we married shortly after I completed high school. I was employed by my father-in-law, Phil, for a year and met my husband during my tenure at his father's company. Initially, I misled my husband into believing he was my first love, though he was not. Before him, there were two other men in my life. The truth came to light post-marriage, prompted by one of my former boyfriends out of guilt, leading me to admit to the second man's existence after it was evident he wasn't my only past partner. Faced with the potential dissolution of our marriage, I dedicated myself to proving my fidelity. Ultimately, he opted to stay, conditioned on my demonstration of unwavering commitment for 5 years, after which we decided to expand our family. Over the next 11 years, we welcomed several more children. At the time of the affair, I was 19, and Phil was over 50, quietly battling alcoholism. The affair with Phil occurred while I was engaged to my husband, spanning from 27 days before our wedding up until 2 days before the event. During that time frame, I saw Phil on 4 separate occasions. The assumed conception date is notably close to our wedding, a day on which I was intimate with both Phil and my future husband. Additionally, I had been with my husband the days immediately before and after. Although uncertain, my inclination is that my husband is the father. Phil and I have since not discussed our past affair, agreeing to act as if it never occurred. After considerable reflection, I've decided against disclosing the affair to my husband, opting instead to wait for the DNA test results. My daughter and husband initiated the DNA test yesterday, reopening this sensitive subject. From what I gather, the results will take over a month to arrive, giving me some time to ponder my next steps should the paternity question not favor my husband. In the interim, my focus remains on caring for my children and grandchild, as well as prioritizing my well-being, given the scant sleep I've managed since this ordeal began. The forthcoming month promises to be challenging, yet I am prepared to confront it head-on. My plan is to continue living life as usual and rely on divine guidance for direction, given that my options are presently limited. We received our testing kits at the start of February and returned them by the 13th of the same month, but we're still in anticipation of the outcomes. Given my situation, I am anxiously awaiting the results, growing concerned there might be a complication. My spouse has reached out to the test providers, who have confirmed that the analysis is in progress. My daughter mentioned her brother's wife received their results in under a month, while it's been over 6 weeks for us. I'm troubled by the thought that the holdup could stem from a potential absence of a biological connection between my husband and our child, which is causing me significant stress. I'm here to update you on the recent developments regarding our family's genealogy test. Luckily, it was confirmed that my husband is the biological father of our daughter. As I've previously expressed, the suggestion of a genealogy test had been a source of immense anxiety for me. This worry impacted my sleep and eating habits. To cope, I began taking extended strolls with my grandchild in the stroller, occasionally doing so twice a day. Unexpectedly, this challenging time resulted in a loss of 19 lbs. I've maintained my routine of walks and healthier eating habits, even after receiving the test results, leading to a total weight loss of 26 lbs. I feel amazing, and my spouse appreciates my transformed look. My sleep quality has also improved. Reflecting on the moment we received the results, it was just after dinner, during cleanup, when my husband decided to check the computer in our bedroom. He returned, announcing the arrival of the results, and suggested calling over my daughter so we could review them collectively as a family. At that moment, my heart raced so rapidly I thought I might faint. I excused myself to the master bathroom for a moment of tranquility. Overwhelmed with emotion, I contemplated informing my husband of my possible health crisis due to difficulty breathing. After calming down in the bathroom for about 10 minutes, I noticed my daughter in the living room, and decided to rejoin my family. It was time to disclose the findings. My husband proposed moving kitchen chairs into our bedroom to use a projector to display the results, a method we were accustomed to from family movie nights. Yet the stress nearly overcame me. The first document he reviewed confirmed his and my biological connection to our daughter. At that moment, I felt a surreal sense of detachment, as if a divine intervention had granted me peace, normalizing my heart rate. I silently expressed my gratitude to the cosmos for this revelation. Discussing our lineage with our children was a delightful experience. We thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. It was a day of emotional liberation from the torment I had inflicted upon myself through my previous thoughtless, selfish, and erroneous actions over the last 21 years. To be frank, my confidence in my husband was fragile initially. At 18, when we began our relationship and he proposed just 5 months later, I could have hesitated and asked for more time, fearing he might choose someone else due to his promising future. In our culture, it's typical for women to marry slightly older men, believed to lay a solid foundation for a durable marriage. As our wedding approached, my uncertainties grew. A pivotal moment occurred during a private conversation with my father-in-law, Phil, in his study. My attraction to Phil wasn't based on affection, but rather his persona as a successful, confident businessman. At the time, my husband hadn't yet found his confidence or path, appearing as a young man in search. However, everything transformed after our marriage, as I grew to deeply love my husband in all aspects, a love that endures to this day. Since starting our life together, the idea of being with another man hasn't crossed my mind. Truly, with our numerous children, there's neither time nor desire for it. The possibility of his loss fills me with dread, as he embodies the same strength, leadership, and confidence his father did 2 decades plus 1 year ago. I'm aware of his appeal to many younger women in our area, which made the results of the genealogy test particularly unsettling for me. The thought of him leaving to begin a new life with someone younger and more appealing haunted me. Will I ever confess to my affair with my husband? No, I won't, for as long as we both shall live. My plan is to disclose it and ask for forgiveness in the hereafter, should such an opportunity be granted by the heavens. A confession now would bring him sorrow, damage his relationship with his father, and shatter our union. I acknowledge the challenge of keeping such a significant secret and understand some may criticize my decision. However, I have made peace with this decision and ask for forgiveness every day. Thank you for supporting me through this challenging journey. I wish for a life full of blessings and happiness for all.